Elisa here. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to this week's episode of Tarot by the Book. If you are new to my channel, welcome. It's so great to have you here. And if you are new to Tarot by the Book, then I want to just give you a quick rundown. So Tarot by the Book is a weekly series on my channel where I give you guys a 3-card week ahead tarot spread. I read it intuitively with a randomly selected deck. And then after I've read the cards intuitively, we dive into the guidebook and see what the guidebook's author, the deck creator, has to say about the cards that we drew. This is really great because it gives us an opportunity to get a feel for how a deck actually reads when it's put into a spread, as well as get a feel for how the guidebook might help us to have a really good reading or get a good reading out of the deck. So this week we are going to be working with the Naked Heart Tarot. This is the 3rd edition by Gillian C. Wilde. And this is a really, really beautiful deck. It's got a crystal grid built into the back of the cards, which I think is super cool. The cardstock is lovely. And the artwork is really well done. It's nature and animal based. It has really great pops of color with whatever creatures or symbols are present on the deck. And it also has very smart use of different symbols and astrological references. There's actually a lot of information, even though there's also a ton of white space, and it really just helps you to focus in on what is on the card, what is calling your attention. And as an intuitive reader, I really enjoy that aspect of this deck. So with that said, let's dive into our 3-card spread. If you would like your spread to be about the week ahead, then simply take a deep breath and focus on your week ahead while I shuffle and prepare for the reading. If you would like instead to use the 3-card positions that I use, which is energy, obstacle, and advice, if you would like to apply those 3 positions to a specific situation in your life, then focus on that situation while I shuffle our cards. And so with that said, let's get ready to dive into our reading. Wow, they just keep wanting to fly out today. All right, let's get into it. So the energy is the Spirit of Wands. Obstacle, and I'll be reading this card as if it were reversed, so I don't read with reversals, but I use this position, the obstacle position, to look at sort of the shadowy side of that card. And advice, the 6 of Swords. So let's zoom in and we'll talk about our reading. Oh, I always have the cards too high. Let's bring them down. There we go. Perfect. So first, let's talk about our energy of the week or of your situation, which is the Spirit of Wands. This is such a gorgeous card. So this card represents the King of Wands, if I remember correctly, but I'm going to go with what I see on the card here. And I see this really gorgeous symbol of a salamander circling around this fox. We also have a wand here and the astrological symbol for Leo, as well as, of course, the alchemical symbol for fire, which this is the suit of fire. This is an energy of really being in charge and not being afraid to stand up for what you need to stand up for. This particular energy is one, I want to say, of dominance. That's the word that pops into my head, but I think this is coming at it. The word is probably too strong for what's really coming through for me intuitively this week. I really feel like this is telling us that we need to stand our sacred ground and really not be afraid to advocate for ourselves, but we don't want to overpower anyone else in that process. We want to come at that place of inner strength and courage from a place of confidence and not of needing to prove ourselves to anyone but ourselves. So really think about that this week as you move through either your situation or your week ahead. Consider how you can stand your sacred ground, stand on your own 2 feet, sort of take a Superman or Superwoman pose and just really take up some energetic space in your life. Don't shrink away or hide from things that pop up this week. Really be present and embodied. That's what's coming through for me from this card. Looking at the obstacle for the week ahead, we have the 10 of Wands, and we see this camel carrying this pretty heavy burden, and he looks tired. He's had enough, right? And if we're looking at the obstacle and this card from the position of being in the reversal, we're looking at sort of the shadowier side of the 10 of Wands, which often tells us that we've probably taken on too much. And I think it's important to point out that sometimes that means that we've been given too much. It's not always that we've voluntarily accepted too much, although sometimes it is. Sometimes we need to look at whether or not we are delegating the responsibilities that we could potentially delegate, and we need to look at whether or not we are sort of willfully allowing ourselves to be dumped on in a way, right? So think about that this week or in your situation. How might you be accepting more than you need to accept? Whether you're putting that on yourself or somebody else is putting it on you, I think these two cards together tell me that there's a real need for self-advocacy here and not letting yourself just take on and take on and take on. Don't be afraid to say no is definitely a strong message that's coming through when I look at these cards in combination. And interestingly, when we look at the advice card for the week, we have the Six of Swords. The Six of Swords is a card about moving away from difficulty. The swords are all pointing to the past, right? And our turtle is moving into the future. And into the future, we see this like rainbow moving across him, like almost reflecting from above. You can imagine he's swimming through the water and the sun is hitting. And that's a real sign that the positivity, the clearing is up ahead, that there is an end in sight to the trouble and the difficulty that maybe you've been experiencing. And it's going to be about really consciously setting your sights on the future and trying not to bring as much of this baggage with you as you can, right? Try to leave as much of it behind as you can is probably the better way to say that. So the Six of Swords moving away from that sort of difficult time, particularly if you've recently had conflict, if maybe you've been sort of dealing with some interpersonal relationship or coworker relationship stuff where there's been some snipping or some back and forth, right? And you're moving away from some of that and you're consciously putting your attention, or the advice rather, is to consciously put your attention and your focus on the future and leave that other gunk kind of behind you, right? Don't keep feeding it. Don't keep feeding it your attention or your focus. Instead, set your sights ahead. So overall, really important to self-advocate this week, really important to stand your sacred ground and say no so you don't end up adding more to your pile. And if possible, look at where in your pile you might be able to relieve some of the burden. You might not be able to. You might already be committed and need to just continue moving ahead, one foot in front of the other, just to make your way through. But just know that any sort of conflict and any headbutting that's been making this seem even harder, you can leave behind you. You just have to consciously set it down and not bring that baggage with you into the rest of your week or into the rest of your month. I hope that this makes some sense for you. It felt very cohesive for me. I'm going to zoom us out and we're going to take a look at the guidebook now and just see what the guidebook had to say about these three cards, still looking at the same positions and the same general sort of point of the reading. So let's take a look first at the Spirit of Wands. I'm actually sort of curious if the Spirit was the King or if it was actually the Queen. I still stand by my reading either way because I do read intuitively, but I couldn't actually remember when I drew the card, so that'll be interesting to see. Spirit, it is the King, hooray. Okay, so that's very validating, cool. So I'm gonna pull this up and I'm gonna read what the entry has to say. And I'm gonna be looking at the light reading for personality traits here. Naked Heart Spiritual Growth. I am the spirit of my spiritual path. I am being encouraged to keep moving forward because I am mastering my journey. I am being asked to share my wisdom with others. I can help others move forward in alignment with their passions. So that is sort of the message. Personality traits. Enthusiastic leader with a desire to motivate others. Is outwardly confident and an inspiration. Charming and compassionate protector. Visionary of dreams and brings them into reality. Inspired by success and is a natural delegator. Determined and focused on achieving goals. So right away, what jumps out at me the most from that guidebook is this concept of the King of Wands, or the Spirit of Wands rather, being a delegator, particularly when we think about the second card that we drew in our reading, about the need for delegation came through in my intuitive reading. This tells me that embodying the energy of the Spirit of Wands this week, the spirit of this fox, and really standing in your power and being able to delegate ties directly into the obstacles we may face this week. But let's see what the guidebook has to say also about the Ten of Wands. So 4 of Wands, 10 of Wands. Okay, so I'll pull the card in and we'll take a look. When the weight of life feels unavoidable and draining, I can decide to let it overload me, or I can choose to reset my energy and move forward with ease. Even if things feel uncomfortable and unclear in the moment, I can choose to check in with my heart and be reminded of my desires. I maintain and reserve self-control based on how I choose to respond. Every step I take forward, I become more resourceful, my direction becomes more manageable, and my energy naturally restores. How fast I get there is up to me. And when we're looking at this card in the reverse, so it's called in this book the Heart Disconnect. It says, I ask myself, is it easier to point the blame outside of myself than to safely and compassionately turn inwards? And the Camel Familiar Whispers, so this is sort of the animal medicine of this card, says, all the resources you need are within you. Love that, love that, love that. And I think this idea that everything you already have is within you. You have what it takes to make it through whatever it is you need to make it through. You just need to pull up those inner reserves of strength. And if you find yourself sort of shifting into that place of blaming others, to really bring it back and look at yourself, look at how you can take responsibility for your current situation, even where it may not have been something that you asked for. You may have not maybe said no or put a boundary up where you needed it, and it's okay to acknowledge that and then figure out the best way to move forward. And I think this does sort of work symbiotically. I'm trying to think of the right word with what I read intuitively. So let's take a look finally at the Six of Swords and see what the guidebook has to say about that. Swords, swords, swords. Where are the swords? There they are. Gentle and compassionate thoughts towards myself create space where healing happens. When I have a clear state of mind, hope is invited to enter. As I release and heal my thoughts of the past, it frees space for my thoughts to come into alignment with where I am now and where I see myself headed. As I think with discernment, I trust myself fully. Turtle Familiar whispers, stay grounded and trust your flow. So I think this really works well with my intuitive message. We'd really gotten through, or what had come through really strongly for me was to set your sights ahead, to really look forward. And I think that's also what the guidebook is essentially saying. Focus on hope, focus on leaving the hurt and the pain behind you. And I think that really works well with what I had to say about this card intuitively. So that, my friends, is this week's Tarot by the Book reading. I would love to hear your feedback down below, to hear whether or not these messages resonated for you, if they felt like they addressed whatever issue you were focusing on, or if you feel like coming back after the week is through and letting us know how it worked out for you. That is always great. I'd love to hear any thoughts you have on the Naked Heart Tarot. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful deck. I will have a link to it in the description box down below if you want to check that out. And remember to like this video if you enjoyed this content, share if you know anybody who wants a great message for their week ahead. Remember to subscribe if you haven't yet so that you can be aware of all my future videos in your content feed. And if you would like to book a reading with me, you can do that at supportivetarot.com. Thanks so much and have a beautiful week, everybody. Bye!